Attention Rocketeers, this is Jim, and before we start the show, Hal and I just wanted to tell you that we'll be at the Movies by Minutes get-together in Chicago on Saturday, August 26th, 2017. There's going to be a lot of other podcasters there, including Pete the Retailer and Comic Book Alex from the Star Wars Minute, and we'll be talking about movies, podcasting, minutes, and a bunch of other things. So for tickets and details, check out moviesbyminutes.com/Chicago. Hope to see you there. Happy Friday, and thank you for spending the entire week with us here at the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, one of the proud airplane nerds from the Experimental Aircraft Association in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And back with us again is Alex from the Star Wars Minute. Welcome back, Alex.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land.
Yes, and if you haven't been to the Star Wars Minute, you are missing, well, the font of all Movies by Minute podcastingdom, if that's a phrase. But please check out Star Wars Minute. And if you haven't, you have a lot to catch up on, because there is movie after movie's worth of great stuff out there. Please go visit. And Alex, thanks so much for being on with us these past several days as we watch men play with a giant brass statue of Charles Lindbergh.
My pleasure.
Alex, have you tallied up the number of minutes you've recorded episodes for at this point, or is that scary?
Yes and yes. I think Pete recently, or my co-host Pete the Retailer, recently figured that between the movies and the weekend show we do for our Patreons, we've done over 600 episodes.
Wow!
So it's
that's amazing.
It's a big thing.
And well, as of this one, Jim and I have done over 19 episodes. So we understand exactly what it feels like to be you, right?
Yeah, I think we've come up with just about 1/3 of an hour here. So anyway, we are back in the bean field watching Cliff and Peavy watching a nice brass Lindy wearing his Howard Hughes built X-3 rocket as it goes around and around and around on a chain. And unfortunately, it looks like the torque is going to be too much for that pipe that Cliff had installed in the ground in that loose soil. So physics is going to take over, or Isaac Newton is going to take command. And wouldn't you know, there goes Lindy, conserving his angular momentum and heading off into the heavens. It is a really good scene from an ILM's point of view. This is a fantastic work in matching the live action with this model work and animation.
Right. Yeah, it's got a real sort of gentle curve to it. It's not just streaking up in a straight line, but it's moving fast. Certainly faster than any jetpack we've ever had. Out there in the real world. But boy, it just looks like fun.
Yeah, it's good.
I was going to say, do you think this is why the scene is done at night? Because I guess maybe to hide some of the effects work, and also so that when it disappears into the sky, it's like a flaming thing up against a black background, as opposed to would that have made any difference if it would have been filmed?
Yeah, at the time, when this movie came out, I was working for a flight simulator company. It's a company that used flight simulators to train pilots, and we had the company that built our simulators was a company called Evans and Sutherland. And
sure.
I had talked with one of their software engineers, and a lot of their simulators were done with night skies. And I said, "Isn't it easier in the daytime?" He goes, "No, but night looks better because there's less reference points. So they usually try to do a lot of their simulations with night, so you just have a star field moving along, and people can use theater of the mind to add in their own details."
Yeah, just maybe a couple of years before this movie was starting production, I was, thanks to my mom, was a civilian employee at an Air Force base south of Seattle, and I would get on base and go visit her now and again, and she got to be friends with one of the guys that ran the simulator bays there. And so for me, as a young airplane geek and young teenage pilot, getting in and flying the C-130 and C-141 and then the F-15 simulators was just an absolute blast. But all of them were only at night. That was the only thing that they would offer, because you have, you can have a nice horizon line, then you have stars up above you, and then, sort of street and city lights on the ground. And it was just much simpler view to present. That's just where the technology was. So probably the same Evans and Sutherland Sims.
Yeah, but yeah, generally, in answer to your question from an hour and a half ago, yes, Alex, it's probably easier to do it at night because it just looks better.
And it helps, of course, with the story that these guys are sneaking out. This is a little bit clandestine. They don't want anybody seeing what they're doing. Although, by all accounts, they're way out in the middle of nowhere, except for the giant and very, very ornate and complex billboards that are around. There's not a ton of civilization out here.
Yeah, it's in the valley beyond Encino, and it just keep looking at all. Just every frame of this film, you can see it on the storyboard where they're showing the pipe moving back and forth, showing that it's going to come loose any second now, and the reaction shots of Cliff and Peavy, and it's very well designed. It doesn't have an improv feel about the whole thing.
When we've got that great shot there, we're looking at Cliff and Peavy. They're looking up, wondering where it is, and then of course we see the little firefly dot come in behind them. They do a really nice job there of showing that it's fast and everything else, but it's also kind of unstable. It's not. It's wandering around. It's sort of looping around, and that's a little bit of foreshadowing to show us, that Peavy's going to have to do something to help Cliff control this thing.
I think they sell it well. The only thing is the pacing is a little bit slow. I think they spend a little bit too much time as they're looking around. It's almost like a British panto show that I think they're expecting the audience to be yelling, "Look behind you,"
right,
while all that's going on. So, but just great looks of dumbfoundedness on them. I mean, I guess I don't know how many takes they had to do that with, but it was very effective.
It's very so. Are we to believe that just by sheer chance this rocket blasts off into the sky and then happens to land more or less at the exact same spot that it took off from?
Yes,
we are to believe that, and okay. Those of us who religiously love this film, we choose to do so.
Okay. Yeah, it just had to. I mean, it was the will of the Force. If you really want to think about it, he had to get his jetpack back, and that's where it came from. So, I'm assuming it's a boomerang that there's only so much of a range that it can do, and the fact that they did have to run after it, so it wasn't directly on top of them. It just barely missed them. I do wonder where that one hill in the middle of the bean field was. Just enough, there's just enough of a hill there to stop Lindy from heading on to Mexico.
Or Kansas.
It almost looks like you could almost... I want to think... I'm going to go with the theory that the rocket actually goes completely around the Earth. And that's how it comes back up behind them. So
just about running out of gas at the very, very end there.
That's good, bold thinking.
Yeah.
So,
it has enough gas for... They perfectly designed it so that it would have one complete go around the circumference of the Earth and then run out of gas for just such an emergency as this.
Yeah, it was a lot more believable than having it punch up through the ground after drilling through China and out, at the other side. So,
Alex, I was sorry for the total tangent, but I was listening to one of your Jedi minutes just recently, and it was C-3PO and his programming of whether or not he would he was able to impersonate a deity, and talking about how here's young Anakin Skywalker programming him. I can't let you pretend to be a god someday because I need that memory for you to do the dishes, and how well that they were thinking ahead, and I was dying.
Yeah. So this might be something that they maybe the thing does have a range limiter on it somewhere. I mean, who knows what's inside that box that Howard Hughes built? It might be like the drone, like drones nowadays. If it gets out of range, it goes back to the direction or the GPS coordinate where it came from.
So now the little hill that's there and amongst the furrows, the only upward spot. You suppose is there a cable mechanism in there? That's being disguised for the effect to just tow this thing in?
I'm assuming that this is the same mechanical effect that was used when the GB crashed on the runway, and it's just there's some underground cable. And I would think that since Alan Arkin is running so fast, this was filmed before they did the GB, because as we know that he severely injured his leg during the GB crash earlier on in the movie. So this must have been shot well before that, unless that's no, that is definitely Alan Arkin on the left of the screen at the end of the minute there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this is before he had any idea to stay away from cables. So, it's funny when I watched the going away from the Rocketeer minute and getting into Star Wars land a bit. When I watched The Force Awakens, I know that Harrison Ford suffered broken bones when he was accidentally hit by the door of the Millennium Falcon during the movie, but I don't know where that happened in the movie, so I'm not sure. I keep wondering which scenes, when you're looking at them, which scenes is he,
Oh,
wearing a cast or just
Sure.
having him parked. So that seems to be my my Han Solo connection with Peavy through this entire movie. I keep watching to see if he's limping or if he's actually walking rapidly, just to figure out where these different scenes fell in.
I was just reading a book about Citizen Kane, and there was a scene while they were filming where Orson Welles, 2 times, he cut his hand open, and also one time I think he broke his foot, and so they filmed kind of him with a broken foot and just kind of did the best they could, and it makes me wonder if someone should do a compilation of movies where actors have had injuries and are now trying to fake their way through just for the sake of completing their movie, just to see.
Yeah, opening with the Martin Sheen bleeding in Apocalypse Now scene.
Right. Yeah. Real life injuries.
Yeah. Yeah, this is ever since I started reading the IMDb trivia section of this film, I cannot look at Jennifer Connelly without noticing whether or not the sty in her eye has cleared up, and it's taken me completely out of the movie now. Well, she isn't in it yet, but
Yeah.
she doesn't seem to have a sty in her little picture that Cliff carries around.
Well, speaking of bodily injury, like, how does someone use one of these jetpacks without like totally scorching their calves and thigh and back of their thighs?
I guess it would be
Hamstrings, that's called?
the asbestos khakis. I think is the only thing you can really
Asbestos
recommend.
jodhpurs, yeah.
Yeah. It
I mean, I guess it's the problem with jetpacks since time immemorial. It's just how you unless you go Ironman style and put the rockets on your feet, you kind of have to deal with having a giant flamethrower on your back.
Yeah, it does seem to be an anathema to your calves. I would think that you'd want to like pick your feet up, and you'd be kind of in a seated position while you were flying. You wouldn't really want. Well, I guess that would increase your drag coefficient. But it's or maybe by the time that the thrust gets to the back of your legs, it's not that bad. I mean,
Still hot enough to keep you up in the air, but
yeah. Just when you watch the SpaceX Falcon 9 landing, it doesn't seem to be scorching anything. So I'm just wondering if there's just if that cone of flame just the heat ends just about where the visible parts of it are.
do you guys think we'll ever have jetpacks?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because we have. It's just been they've just been so wildly impractical. You really started with what they called the Bell rocket belt, which was sort of a rocket but not a belt, but everybody called it a jetpack even though it wasn't a jet. And yeah, exactly. It was discuss. That's one we see in Thunderball at the beginning of that the Bond film. And those, they worked. They were real. Everything else. The problem was they had a flight time of about like 25, 28 seconds. That's all the fuel they could carry.
Yeah.
And then for years, a couple of private companies, there's a really long and fascinating story, and a couple of great books written about the private companies that have been working with this. And some of them have come along. And after 30 years of experimenting, they were getting the flight time up to about 31 seconds, which just does not feel like progress. Then a couple of things happened in the last several years. One was a company in New Zealand called Martin Jetpack, which built a thing, which again is not a jet or a pack. It's more of a thing you sort of step into, and it looks like something out of like a Call of Duty video game or something. It's you sort of step into it and kind of strap yourself to it, and then it's got two ducted fan propellers, so basically two rotors over your shoulders. And they've tested that, and that's they flew that, in fact, here very, very briefly a few years ago, and they're taking it really, really slowly. But they've done unmanned tests where they've flown that up to 5,000 feet and had it cruise around and everything else. So that at least could sort of get you from point A to point B. And then more recently, there's a company called Jetpack Aviation, which has done something that looks much more like the original sort of the Bell rocket packs that we're used to. Thing can do, 50, 60 miles an hour, so it can't quite circumnavigate the Earth in a few seconds the way the Sirius X3 could back in 38. But they've had something of a breakthrough. It's really not a rocket. It is more of a true turbine jet, a true twin-engine thing. And now they can fly for 10 minutes. So it's still not exactly mass transit ready, but a pretty substantial improvement over, after decades stuck at that 30-second mark.
Well, they do have that near limitless one, although it's a tether. The
water one, sure, the jet
water
one.
Jetpack America, which is for $6,000 you can fly. I don't know what the height is. It's like 100 or 200 feet tops, but still you can have the jetpack experience, I think.
Yeah, you can get that experience, and you've got that hose that comes off your back, and then that's connected down to it's basically like an unmanned jet ski that sits in the water, and that's the pump, and that's what provides the thrust. So you're not actually carrying the power plant with you, so you're always tethered to that, and then of course you always have to stay over water. But it looks like an absolute blast because it is absolutely that jetpack experience, and you can obviously fly a lot longer. You just have to tow your engine in the water wherever you go.
Although I would picture, even though there's not a problem with flame, the amount of pressure coming off of that, like more than a fire hose, it would probably rip the skin right off the back of your legs if you ever connected.
Exactly. So asbestos wetsuits is what we recommend now, apparently. It all
So
comes
what
back
you're
to
saying
that.
is no, we will never have jetpacks.
Now, come on.
Until they can invent a fuel that somehow could be much more portable, that you don't need, other than gas or
You'd have to carry like an external tank with you, like the space shuttle. That would be the thing, and you have to wrap your arms around the external tank and then just hope for the best as you aimed it.
So I guess no.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a beautiful. If you want a jetpack that looks like this seems to be the thing that you'd want. And I've seen the Dave Stevens style, that single tank that looks like an oversized scuba tank. But I really do like the double nacelle jetpack that's in the movie. It seems, it matches your shoulders. It feels like you feel a little bit more symmetrical and.
Having twice the thrust and having that thrust spread out a little bit just makes sense. And it's funny, we've talked about, several episodes talked about Stevens and he was so closely involved with this movie, so I feel okay loving the changes that were made, because I still feel like tone-wise this is one of the most faithful adaptations ever, even though there's some pretty significant plot points that differ. But that's one of them. I agree with you completely, Jim. The rocket pack design for the movie, I think, just looks better in every way than Stevens' original, even though it feels blasphemous to say that. Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks about the current design that we're seeing here is that there doesn't seem to be it's a constant velocity and doesn't really have any control surface. It just kind of thrusts as much as it can, and I guess what the original design, the Howard Hughes design, was to just point your shoulders at where you wanted to go, and hopefully it'll aim you where you could go, and also help you land.
Yeah, and if you miss where you're wanting to go, we know now that you'll go all the way around the world and end up right back where you started automatically.
Right in the bean field, yeah. Right, so the important thing is to aim for a good soft pile of dirt.
I never really thought about this, but to go back into airplane nerddom for just a moment, a lot of the more prominent fighter airplanes in World War I had rotary engines. So your Sopwith Camel and Fokker triplane, sort of traditional airplanes that we know about. And those rotary engines, though, also didn't really have a throttle. It was basically all or nothing. And so there's a handful of those engines flying today, and when you hear those airplanes flying, it's really, really remarkable, because when they're landing, when they're slowing down, they're literally just sort of blipping the engine on and off and on and off, just brap, brap, like that, just
Wow.
because they can't run at a lower power setting. So just imagine getting in your car and it's floored, except so once in a while you turn the key off to slow down, then you turn it back on again. Is how you have to fly those types. So,
Wow. So obviously, PV has some work set out for him here, and we'll be talking about that as early as next week. Alex, thanks so much for being on the show this week to talk about this. I hope you get to see the other 100+ minutes of this film. It's not. It has seeing these 3 minutes enticed you more for seeing the rest of the movie, or how do you feel?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I mentioned, like, it's not like I have anything against the movie. It's just it never, nowadays pretty much the only movies I see are things that are on Netflix or Amazon or show up on TV, and I'll be happy to watch it if it just never crossed my path, I guess.
Got it. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: hearing us talk about it makes you want to watch it more or less?
No, I'd say it's your enthusiasm is definitely contagious. So yeah, I'd say more. It makes me want to watch.
If it showed up, so you're at the point where if it showed up on a screen in front of you and it's just Walt Disney Pictures Presents, you might sit through the movie if nothing else is going on. That's all we ask for.
If I was in a room with a screen and the movie came on and someone held my head in the position, held my head up so I could watch it, then yeah, I guess I would watch it.
Okay, I'll take that as an endorsement. Good.
And Jim's on the next flight to Portland with that.
Yes. another happy viewer.
Yeah.
So, well, great. Well, again, Alex, thanks so much for being on the show. I hope everyone listening to us is also listening to the Star Wars Minute, because if you're not, you're just wasting your life. Check out Star Wars Minute at, funnily enough, Star Wars Minute, and it's out there. You've got lots to catch up on if you haven't been there. In the meantime, you can also, if you want to catch up with our puny show, we're over at a couple of places. We're on Twitter at Rocketeer Minute. We are on. What are the other ones? Oh, we're on Facebook at the Rocketeer Minutes. It's the Rocketeers Bulldog Cafe. That's out there where everybody gets together and talks about these episodes. Also, the great big site, RocketeerMinute.com, where you can get cool swag and get a movie that you can sit down and have somebody force you to watch right there from Amazon.
We may want to work out some sort of deal where we can include a head-holding device.
Yes, that might be with fins.
Yes, since we can't include Jim in every order.
Yeah, maybe the helmet. If you have the helmet, with just playing the movie in a loop. But yeah, definitely something to check out. So go to any of those many sites. And we will be back next week with more adventures in the Beanfield and how they're going to explain this Burning Man out in Burning Man in California is one of those things that's been going on for years. This kind of proof. But we'll talk about that some more next week on a Rocketeer Minute. So join us here. Until next time, over and out.
Go get him, kid.